Good morning and welcome to our newest edition of Tourismus Namibia, our weekly live show which we bring to you, bringing you news, a few ideas for holidays and an interview. So we've got these three categories: topics, destination and to the point. My name is Frank Steffen, welcome today, and before we have a look at the first topics, let's just quickly have a peek at what the market has to offer. Topics today, I've got three topics again, obviously on everybody's mind, and whether we like it or not. Air Namibia is being closed. This is obviously an aviation company that comes from very long and far gone days, starting off in 1946, so it's 74 years old. A whole lot of tradition, obviously long before independence, but after independence we clearly made a big effort to up the game there, and sadly it did not work out. This was in the beginning when we started getting our first new big planes. So they've finally decided, the government now, that is as the main shareholder or as the only shareholder, have decided enough is enough. They've over the years since independence pumped something like 11 billion into this company, and it wasn't to be. And I think COVID has really just been the final nail in the coffin there, because their assets at this stage amount to something like 1 billion, and they owe something like 3 billion all in all. So no matter how you look at it, the government would never have stopped pumping money into this company. So clearly there are many people who complain now, not least of them being the 600 employees who are obviously sort of hanging in the air now. They've been promised a salary payment for the next 12 months still, but at the end of the day, the moment you enter liquidation phase, I'm not so sure what would happen, especially with the liquidation costs really accruing to the creditors and not to the shareholder. The shareholder can now basically hold up hands and say, listen, I've lost my money, what are you losing? So it's a big hoo-ha. I mean, if you look at their biggest creditors, I mean, just alone the airports company, they owe something like 710 million. Then taxes in arrears of 475 million. And we all know of Challenger, by the way. Some write it Challenge Air as two words, as you would find it in the English language. It's actually a Belgian company, and they did a bit of a play on words, and that's why they call themselves Challenger. So it's just a bit of a different name to it all. But anyway, and they would have gotten 180 million. So you can quickly see why the point had arrived where enough is enough and nobody could carry on in the way that they've done it until now. Then obviously my favorite subject, Recon Africa, but on a different note. This week we, amongst others, had articles of this frack-free Namibia, and they're obviously pushing very hard there. At the bottom you can see the letter, or the start of, or part of the letter, press release that the Botswana government gave out this week, where they explained that Sudilo Hills and the Delta, or Kavango Delta that is, are excluded from the license that they've given out to the company Reconnaissance Energy Africa. In the meantime, here you can see Q7 all over the internet. He and his friends and quite a number of the local people, Sun people, it's obviously the Ku and Kwe and whatever. They're doing a march in South Africa for some time now, and they'll be in Cape Town, if I remember correctly, this weekend. So if you want to follow this, go onto the internet, or specifically Facebook. That's where you find it. Q7, just put that in, or otherwise just walk to, say, the Okavango Delta, and there at the bottom you see, say, the Okavango Delta. the sun won't move and so on. This is clearly all part of the Recon Africa argument that there shouldn't be any search for oil up in Okavango, which is a sensitive or ecologically sensitive area. We've been speaking about it at length on this program, and the latest update that concerns many people is that apparently while these people have gotten their environmental clearance certificate, in fact they never had they were never allowed to actually use water from the Okavango River. So suddenly, or actually they don't have the authority to actually make use of any water for this operation. That needs to be separately authorized apparently by NAM Water. So there seems to be an issue on that case. And then some of you might remember that I wrote about and spoke here about Max Muyemburuko. He's the chairman of the Local Conservancy Association, which also includes the forestry control that they have up there in the north. And he actually told us as newspaper that, actually posted it, that he went and met up with a man who's living right next to the borehole. And that man wasn't ever sort of informed properly how close that borehole would be to his home. And so when he spoke to the project manager about the noise, day and night noise that's going on as part of the drilling and exploration now, he was told not to speak to them. They've got all the authority to do as they please. And the headman told them it's fine. And so if he's got a problem, he can speak to the headman. So, and this guy is now obviously arguing and saying, everybody told us that our standard of living and everything would be improved by this whole operation. And until now, we don't see any of those benefits in terms of noise pollution, in terms of water pollution already, with them putting their water into a mud pit without the proper lining. And so it really is becoming a bigger and bigger upset as we carry on, because typically this is what happens when oil exploration happens. People are quickly told not to worry, and then over time the complaints start creeping in, and in an area which is just something like 60-70 k's as the crow flies from Bushman land, and that whole ecosystem on that side, quite apart from it basically being on the border of the ephemeral river Okavango, Umuramba, that's a serious issue. So I don't know why our government hasn't responded yet. You would have thought that it's quite important to look at this whole issue, but let's see what will happen in the near future. And talking about a success story in this regard, you will actually enjoy the next story. This is where we had written about in various newspapers in Namibia, and it's a case of David winning the war against Goliath, because 6 mines have in fact been told to shut down their operations in an area called Ocho-Orongo and Gros Okanjo. So if you look at the photos here, you will see that these photos were supplied, but there's a whole lot of antique rock art there in those areas. You're talking of something like 30 sites with more than 500, or 30 protected sites with more than 530 rock engravings. And some of these have already been permanently destroyed by these guys who are mining for granite, and so it's a big issue. It is the farmer and the local community of Ocho-Orongo who really made a point of complaining. And so when the ministry finally had a relook at the environmental clearance certificates and the studies themselves, they found that there wasn't ever any notion to have a look at that sort of type of surrounding and seeing what is there. I mean, these are not small items. This is something that's unique to Namibia. So it's part of the heritage of Namibia, and apparently when you do an environmental assessment study, you have to also have a look at the heritage that is part of that environment. And clearly that was never done. So as we speak today, they've actually got a meeting planned between the Ministry of Mines and Energy and the Heritage Council and the local community of Otjiwarongo. And they will have a look at what can be done to possibly continue with some of the mining operations subject to these sites being saved. Now, I've got a different view on that. I'm not quite sure that you can marry those two. If you've got a heritage site such as that, if you look at the photo in the back, which we've got as a background today, I mean, just imagine you take that mountain, take half of it away for mining and say, oh, but the rest is still very beautiful. And this is like telling people to come and have a look at rock art. But, oh, by the way, we've got some mining activity next door, and so please don't be disturbed. I just feel some of these things you can't, there isn't a compromise for each and every situation in life. And that one doesn't do it for me. So I seriously feel that the whole area needs to look the part. So that when you get there, you just feel that you are out in the bush and this is where rock art belongs and this is the surrounding that should come as part of the ambient. So, yeah, I don't know what compromise they'll find there today, but my view on that is a very dim one. It should be conserved as it is, in the surroundings it is, and if there's some other granite you can pick up more further away, 30 k's, 50 k's away, by all means do it. I'm not somebody principally going against the notion of mines being somewhere and doing their work. Clearly it needs to be, but it doesn't need to be in an ecologically tender area or sensitive area, and so I'm very convinced that this is only a part success, but at least they were able to close down the mining operations of 6 mines for the time being until they've sorted out this problem. So hopefully we can get to some similar arrangement for Recon Africa. Yeah, those are our topics for today. Next up is destinations. That's obviously the part that we most like in the show. Taking you around and giving you a few ideas of where you can spend your next holiday. Welcome back. As you can see, I've been joined by Chloe Deur. I suppose I don't really need to introduce you anymore. Welcome.
Thank you.
Chloe's actually made a point of just quickly driving here from Henty's Bay, so kudos to you there. I don't know if I would have seen that. So what we've just discussed, she's busy down there at the moment. So next week we will try and actually have a live link to Henty's, and maybe she can show us whether the fish is biting or not, even if it's only your toe. Anyway, so destinations, that's what's up next. So what have you brought us?
Well, this week, similar to some previous broadcasts, I'm going to be focusing specifically on the Waterberg Plateau as a whole. As you can see, that's where we are based. And just because our recent edition has kind of told the story of the Otjiwarongo region and the travels that I had there. But the Waterberg Plateau was an absolutely incredible experience for me. I mean,
and it's much greener now again already.
But you must remember that these photos are green, and by that stage there had been no rain. And so it just, for me, I mean, when I arrived back in January, I wasn't as surprised to see Namibia as green as it is, because I had seen the Waterberg and the very Midlands almost look of absolute green and vegetation. But I was astounded by the beauty. But I'm really intrigued by kind of how the makeup of the mountain, kind of the Echu sandstone on the upper rims being porous like a sponge, and so it is almost an evergreen environment.
Because lots of water there.
And because of the height, 200 meters high, it cuts the cloud bank, so forced precipitation and the pooling streams on the shale's slopes beneath. It really is like a Garden of Eden in the middle of the desert.
Its name, Waterberg, does fit.
completely. And obviously it was the site of some historical battles that there are walks that you're able to go on to learn more about that. But all the other lodges were closed in the area at the time, so I focused specifically on the Waterberg wilderness, which was exceptionally beautiful. I mean, they have hikes there that honestly, I mean, you could spend days and days and days just exploring each one individually. Just because the wildlife and the lush vegetation and the bird life was unlike anywhere I've seen in that part
exactly,
of the
it's further
country.
down. One must get this into perspective. It's not as if it's the only place where there are birds or something. It's simply a matter of suddenly finding out so much closer to home that you've got these same opportunities.
Exactly, but I mean, look at this. This could be a tropical rainforest, like anywhere.
And by the way, the NWR site is exactly the same, so it's really all around. Yeah,
I've heard so. I mean, there's something I would love to do. I didn't actually hike to the plateau, which is something I would love to do at some stage. But NWR actually offers I think it's a 5-day hike that you kind of camp on the top and goes over the plateau, which I think is worth looking into, obviously outside of summer. But I mean, just look at this vegetation. It really is like a crown. And the lichen that clings to the rocks brings out the most incredible colors. I mean, look at that lime green and blood orange. It's honestly, for me, it was one of the most inspiring trips I've been on, just because I hadn't even imagined.
Yeah, because I remember you were quite cynical
in
the beginning when I said I want you to go and have a look at Otjilonjupa.
It felt too close to home. It felt, I mean, it's only 3 hours from Windhoek. It felt like it wasn't an adventure, but boy, it was more of an adventure than I ever imagined, and somewhere where I'm definitely going to be returning. I mean...
Yeah. No, there's lots to do in Otjilonjupa. I still maintain it's really the hotspot for lodges and look, if you're into hunting, even hunting. But the big thing is there's choice, second to none. I mean, you could possibly fill, I don't know, anything from 3 to 4 magazines just concentrating on all the various lodges and guest farms and
roads. I mean, roads alone I could write an entire story on. But now the Waterberg Wilderness, they have a variety of accommodation options from camping to lodging. And so I experienced both. And this was the view from the plateau camp. And that backdrop is unbelievable. And I mean, the fact that every campsite has a pool is just an added benefit, especially if you've been hiking, and you know it's crystal
just
clear and but also it's just an added luxury to a campsite that's otherwise very rustic. This was the Plateau Lodge, which had exceptional views over the Savannah Plains that are also form part of the farm, and each room has almost like a drum plunge pool. But the views were unbelievable, and interestingly, you could see in the distance the canals that link. I think Von Bach Dam. The canals that come from there all the way through to
it's the Matako Canal,
and I had never heard of those before. So the wealth of knowledge that you accumulate while staying there is just unbelievable. And on those plains, that's where the rhino roam free. But I loved how the lodge was constructed to almost emulate the sandstone boulders that kind of
because it's they use that,
in the landscape.
There's a bit of a Basutu look about it if you look at the reefs.
Very much so. But I mean, duckies galore. They were absolutely everywhere. But I love how surreptitiously it's kind of built into the landscape and surrounded by trees. It really is beautiful.
This is typical Waterberg landscape.
Now this was the Anderson camp, which I preferred to the Plateau campsite because of how treed it was, but also it's much smaller, and so you really get that sense that you are out in the wilderness and in a tropical environment. And this is the original farmhouse, the Wilderness Lodge, and here they have this bamboo forest. And I can't tell you, I actually had to pinch myself and remind myself that I was in Namibia, because you could be in Bali, you could be, I mean, that kind of vegetation was unbelievable. And I didn't stay there, but I have to say it looks like I mean, an
It's a little
unbelievable
paradise,
spot.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And like you said, it's all green. Your eyes first have to get used to it.
Especially when coming from the Komos region. I mean, you must remember this was before the rains, and we were desperate for rain. And I was parched, so hot in fact that I didn't even pack a duvet or a sleeping bag. And then I got surprised and froze myself half to death while camping. Yeah. But still, I mean, it was a pleasant surprise and just a magical experience in general, and one that I think people should definitely take advantage of.
The big thing about Waterberg area that I like is there's something for everybody's purse. I mean, the person who wants his luxury and really is into that, it's settled. It's not a problem. You can do. A normal person who's got a lesser pay and still wants to get to know that area, they can go there, whether it's NWR, whether it's this lodge. There are quite a number of lodges along the site, and as you drive, you often find another guest farm offering campsites or just come over for the night, bed and breakfast, that sort of thing. It's spread all over.
And each one also has kind of like an attraction of its own. I know that a couple of lodges further down, they are famous for their water buffalo sightings, which I didn't get the chance to see, but apparently...
But even NWR, I mean, you've got the buffalo. It's the only area beyond the northern areas where you are allowed to have a buffalo, because it's foot and mouth cleared.
Oh, yeah.
But that's why once in a while you find, because buffaloes are typical carriers of foot and mouth disease, so every once in a while you suddenly find out that they shut it down for a moment, just quarantine those areas where they found it, just to quickly get it under control. And it's normally just a quick thing, and then they've got it under control again. But it's the only place in Namibia where you still have water buffaloes.
I didn't realize that, actually.
Yeah.
But outside of their hiking attractions, they also do rhino tracking. And personally, I don't usually like to disclose the location of rhino, just for obvious reasons. We're in a war for their conservation. But I learnt through this experience that in order to fund the rhino conservation, they have to sometimes have tourist attractions that fund the protection. And so the tracking experience actually ended up being a 9-kilometer trek through the savannah plains. But our guide, Wesley, was a wealth of information because he is from the surrounding conservancies and a Herero, very proud Herero man. And he was teaching me of all the traditional uses and the plants that surrounded me.
This is actually the Matako Canal.
Yeah, these are the canals. I still don't understand why they are open and not closed, just because of evaporation, but they are crystal clear. I mean, you could easily just dunk a glass in there and have a sip. I mean,
it's an ongoing conflict, that canal, because number one, only not half the water arrives in Windhoek finally, where it's destined for, because it's been taken down from the north right down. And but the other thing is many animals drown in that. And
I've heard that.
Yeah. So it's always an issue there. Yeah.
But as you can see, I mean, it really is. You really are tracking them, and I mean, it's more than just about the rhino, though. It's also about the surrounding wildlife. But we eventually found them towards the further end, like sleeping under the trees, which they generally do at that time of day. And just being on foot and being incredibly close proximity, almost too close. I was actually, nervous at times, but it gave me the opportunity to really admire rhino, up close, but also in such a vulnerable position. That some of these photographs almost look like it's the rhinos in a zoo. And I mean, I don't have one of those wildlife lenses that are the length of an arm. I was close enough to be able to photograph them, from here, just behind the shield of a tree or whatever.
This is the moment when you become a bit shaky, when they start walking towards you.
I've got to say that I had a couple of moments of being afraid. I was actually lying on my stomach underneath a tree trying to get a low angle shot, and my dad was recording from the sidelines, and his hat blew off and gave the rhino such a big fright. And I promise you, I nearly died. I promise you that it was one of the scariest experiences. But the thing is that they've got respect for the rhino, which is, you know, it's not one of those attractions that that you almost feel sick afterwards, as if it's an exploitation of the rhino.
No, because it's still in its natural habitat.
And they're also heavily protected. I mean, we came across a number of guards as we walked that are constantly patrolling the fences.
They've got to, by the way. It's a law.
Exactly.
If you're allowed to keep rhino, they're under 24/7 protection. Doesn't always work out. I mean, at the end of the day, it's still a human looking after a wild animal.
Yeah.
But that's why you generally find that the whole poaching thing has gone down substantially in Namibia.
Still
because
a huge
they're literally
problem,
watched
but it
off,
has gone down. And I mean, yeah, like I said, I mean, we've always got to be careful about where we, especially if you see rhino outside of, you know, a kind of very protected area. I would avoid disclosing the location or the sighting or whatever, because there are, you know, people out there.
Threat, yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, we have to just come together to, you know, fight against this.
Yeah.
But it was an absolute honor to be able to experience
No,
that.
it's a funny feeling if they suddenly stand in front of you so close. I've had that before, and you suddenly feel, wow.
On foot. I mean, that was what was a bit.
No car to hide it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I was just looking at surrounding trees and deciding which one I would jump up.
And
if
even
one.
that, it was funny actually. We had friends, and they've got rhinos on their farm, and she was suddenly sort of half attacked. I think it was more an effort to get her away, and she was walking alone in the bush, and then she said she ran behind a biggish tree, but she knew like this beast didn't basically run through it.
Yeah.
And she says what she remembered most vividly was as if there was fright in the animal's eyes.
Yeah.
And she suddenly realized this big, enormous piece of meat is more afraid of me than I'm of her. So it was quite a funny experience as she described it. But for her, it was a huge eye-opener in terms of, you know, we think we're afraid of them. They're much more afraid of us.
And I mean, look, with poaching, they can't tell who's a poacher and who's an innocent bystander. So you can never, you can't take for granted an experience like this where you are so close and they allow you to be so close, because they are, in general, you know,
more aggressive under that circumstance. Yeah,
so
more defensive, really. You know, we always talk about aggressiveness. It's not aggressive; it's defense.
For good reason as well. So, anyway, so that's just a couple of things you can do in the area, and I mean, I would do them all and more. So
yeah. No, just a few ideas again. So go to Waterberg. You can pick any of these 100 lodges around there. There really is big choice. Simply Google Otjozondjupa and have a look at what you can get in terms of hospitality. And you'll be surprised, obviously, not only Waterberg, but beyond that, going up to Grootfontein, going to the Otavi Mountains. I mean, there's plenty. Otjozondjupa is really a big part of Namibia, so there's lots to see and to enjoy.
And a lot of other ideas you'll be able to get in our recent magazine, which came out on Monday. So
yeah. Anyway, enjoy. I hope you enjoyed this show.
Thank you.
Right, that was Destinations with Chloe Deer. Hope you enjoyed that part. I must be honest, I think Otjozondjupa is one of those areas that's not properly marketed yet as far as I'm concerned. I know that many of the lodges do their own little marketing and so on, and I know that the Namibia Tourism Board is busy on it every once in a while, especially on the Tourism Expo in Berlin, the ITB. But I just feel not enough is being done to actually market it to the local people yet. And there really is such a lot to do. I, for my part, have always been in the habit of when I drive to Grootfontein, I don't drive the tar roads up to Otavi and then to Grootfontein. I actually turn off at Okakarara and then I start looking for the next gravel road and work my way up to Grootfontein or Rietfontein for that matter. So there's lots to see. There are many lodges on the way up there, and it's a beautiful area. And here's a secret tip. The moment that you're further away than 10 kilometers from the closest tar road, it's funny how suddenly the kulu and the eland and all types of animals are being spotted, because those are areas where hardly any people drive. So you might consider doing it the same next time you go there. Up next, we've got an interview. It was done by Jolanda Nel of the Windhoek Express, and she spoke to Wolfgang Grellmann of Westair. Have a look.
Welcome back, viewers. As I mentioned earlier, I'm here sitting with Mr. Wolfgang Grellmann. He's the founder of Westair Aviation. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Yolanda.
Thank you so much for making the time to answer our questions. And we would just like to know, can you run us through how this company started?
It's a long story. We're 54 years old. It started in '65 as a maintenance organization, and the only flying related work that was done was at training facility. That kept on going until the 80s. That's when a young lot of entrepreneurs got together and started Westair in earnest to try and branch out into charter work, etc. So it took a long time to get where we are today. This is not a thing of 10 years or 20 years. As I said, it's 50 years, more than 50 years. And today we are an organization that has got an excellent maintenance facility that looks after their own aeroplanes. We've got a training facility. We've got a huge pilot corps. We are in jet aircraft, which I never thought I would see in my lifetime. And so, yes, we've grown.
Why was it so important to start this company?
Well, at the time when I started off, my initial idea was to get a fully independent maintenance organization going. In those days, we still used to send electronic equipment to South Africa for repairs. We used to send instruments to South Africa for repairs, and only the basic maintenance was done here. Propellers were overhauled in South Africa, engines were overhauled in South Africa. We were just doing the maintenance on the airframes. And the idea was to become an organization that does everything in-house or together with satellites. Satellite companies that were set up, and we finally managed to do this.
Well, thank you so much for enlightening us and giving some background information of the company. With Ashley Pransloo, and she's also from Westair Aviation. Ashley, welcome.
Thank you for having me.
Quickly tell us, since Westair began their operations, you have expanded your routes tremendously. Quickly run us through what routes are you offering, and are you planning on expanding more in future?
So currently, when Fly Westair started, we just started with the Ondangwe, Windhoek Eros, Oranjemund sectors. A short while after that, we started flying to Cape Town from Oranjemund, and now we fly to Johannesburg as well. We touched a little bit on the Walvis Bay schedule. Obviously, COVID hit everybody with the pandemic, so we've slowed our routes a little bit, but we should be relooking at them once everything gets lifted.
But talking about COVID, you also have a testing facility here. Why did you decide to offer this to your clients?
So we found that with the requirement of PCR tests for traveling, Pathcare was getting a little bit inundated with the testing. So we have an agreement with Pathcare in place, and what we did was we set up a facility here at our offices. So we have 2 paramedics that work for us. They conduct the tests and they take it over to Pathcare. So it kind of just alleviates the pressure from them as well, and our passengers can get their tests in time for their flights.
And at what times and at what dates do you do the testing?
So times is between 8 o'clock and 10 o'clock here at our Westair facilities, and it's daily.
And are there any costs involved?
So a PCR test with Westair costs 950 Namibian dollars. That's pretty much covers the cost of the test itself, and then you come, you get your test, you book your appointment with our paramedics.
But why I'm so excited talking to Ashley is because she's also a pilot. Ashley, quickly run us through, what does it mean being a woman in this very male-dominated business?
Yeah. Predominantly in major parts of the world, there's still quite a lot of issues with having females in this industry, especially in the cockpit. I try to follow a lot of female pilot forums on social media, and you know, one can just see how many women have so much trouble working, you know, sharing a cockpit with a male, who it's still generally frowned upon to have a female in this line of work. People think we tend to be sensitive and don't want to get our hands dirty, but it's not the case. But I must say, at Westair, we're a very tight-knit family. I've never felt like an outcast, or, you know, because I'm a woman. If anything, I get laughed at when I drag my pillows to the aircraft. As you can see, I'm not the tallest person on earth. But other than that, luckily, in my personal experience, I haven't had any bad experiences, but there are lots of women around the world who struggle with this daily. Hopefully in the future it will become a more common experience to see a lady up front, if not two ladies, but we'll get there eventually, I think.
Well, thank you so much, and I'm so glad that you found a safe space and you can actually live your dream.
Definitely. Thank you very much.
3, 2.
Welcome back, viewers. I'm now joined with Hendrik de Bruin. He's from the maintenance department here at Westair Aviation. Hendrik, welcome.
Thank you very much, Yolanda. Appreciate it.
Can you quickly run us through what exactly is happening here in the maintenance department?
Well, at this stage we are looking after about a fleet of 44 aircraft. That's in our entire fleet, which includes piston aircraft, turbo propeller aircraft like the ones just behind me, as well as turbine jet engines, which is more the bigger aircraft, the Embraer 145, currently the biggest aircraft in our fleet.
And you have a very great training opportunity here.
This is our training. We've got about 12 apprentices currently in our system that we are training. Basically what we do is we get the apprentices in, they start off on the floor working, physical hands-on working, basically on the job training, and then we also send them, apart from the training that we do on the job here with them, we also send them for a 9 months training course in South Africa, where after they do their, how can I say, they go in trade. They do their trade certificate, which will qualify them as an aircraft mechanic afterwards.
This is something very new and different for Namibia. How does it make you feel to be part of something like this?
Well, I won't say it's new for Namibia. I think it's coming on, even I went through the system and I'm in the system 21 years. But I think now at this stage it's at a much larger scale, as we haven't experienced in the past. To be part of this, well, it's a great achievement, I think, for Namibia to be able to train 12 apprentices at one specific time. I think that's a first for Namibia to be that huge number. But it's because we are a big operation and we require skill. Lately, to get the skill, especially to get it in from other places, is difficult. So to train in-house, you train them, you start them, they are trained after your hand, you know what you got at the end, you know what you've put into these guys and what you will achieve from them. So it makes it just so much better. And yeah, I think it's a great achievement for Namibia and especially for us.
And then you hope they stay?
Well, most of them normally stay.
That's
so
good.
Here and there you get one that's going somewhere else, or doesn't want to continue with it, go into some other directions, but most of them stays, yeah.
Nee. Hendrik, thank you so much for your time. We do appreciate it.
All right, thank you very much, all of the best. Is that it?
Is dat? Wat maak ek daar vir jou los? Sien wyse besigheid hierdie. Baie dankie. Lekker dag.
Right, that was the interview with Wolfgang Grellmann. Most people will know him. He's been with Westair as long as most of us will dare to imagine. So I suppose in the next few months, as Air Namibia has stopped their operations, you're likely to see that companies like Westair will pick up and try and serve people the way they were served before. So let's see what happens. With that, we come to the end of the show. I hope you enjoyed it and hope to see you next week again. Until then, stay safe.